Opening credits. Wanted by the Dragon. Shifter Paranormal Romance Short Story. By Selina Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Chapter 1. Cameron, you have to come see this, Rachel said in an excited whisper as she shook my shoulder. I opened one eye and moaned softly to myself, and flipped back over on the couch where I had crashed the night before, too drunk to make it past the living room. We had been celebrating my best friend Rachel's engagement to her longtime boyfriend, Michael, but apparently we had celebrated a little bit too much if the headache I felt just hearing her whisper was any indication of my current situation. Stop talking, my head is falling off, I murmured, burying my head under a throw pillow that did nothing to shield the unyielding sun peeking through the blinds of my living room. No, seriously, Cameron, this is without a doubt the best moment of your life. Apparently God has answered your prayers and sent you a man. I thought wryly to myself. I didn't know that I had been praying for a significant other. That was news to me. This whole time I thought my prayers focused on increasing my metabolism so that I could still eat ice cream without it all going to my thighs. Apparently unfazed by my silence, Rachel was buzzing about trying to contain her excitement. At one point, I heard her whistling softly to herself as if she were admiring something, and I turned and opened both eyes to look at her. She was jumping up and down ecstatically now. I swear, my friend had the energy of a 5-year-old. You wouldn't know it, given that she dressed like an emo teenager in all black, with dark red lipstick and a no-nonsense bob as a haircut. People assumed she was the serious one, but no. That role would go to me. I was a brunette too, but my hair was wavy and resembled a Disney princess, as one little girl had told me, and I had light blue eyes. My hair and eyes were my best features in my opinion, given that I wasn't a big fan of my curvy backside and almost non-existent.
Censored.
I figured there had been a mistake made somewhere in my gene pool. I had so much going on regarding my rump, but nothing going on up top. It was a tragedy that made shopping trips uber depressing. That's why I wore baggy shorts and tank tops all the time. I couldn't figure out what else could possibly fit when I was 2 sizes smaller on the top than I was on the bottom. Determined to ignore my best friend and continue sleeping, I groggily said, I don't even like men anymore. They suck and have smelly feet. My statement came out sounding like I was 4. And I instantly felt silly. I couldn't waste my energy thinking about a certain deadbeat ex-boyfriend who couldn't.
Censored.
Hey, not all men are like Preston, Rachel said, catching on easily to who I was referring to in my comment. She then tugged at my arm, trying to get me off the couch. Yes, they are, you just don't know it yet, I said, pulling my arm back. Preston was my shiftless ex, and I wasn't exactly mourning the end of our relationship. After all, it wasn't as if he had been a prize. I had only dated him because he was just one of the handful of single men in town that was my age, and hey, a girl has needs. He had dumped me unceremoniously one evening, stating that I was too cold and aloof. He was right. I didn't like emotional attachments. I ran from them. As I turned my thoughts away from Preston, I realized that Rachel was stronger than I thought and had already pulled half my body off the couch. My shoulder hit the floor, and I grimaced as I toppled completely off the couch, hitting the thick area rug beneath me. Ouch! I rubbed my shoulder and gave her a dark look. Shush, she said, walking over to the window and peering out at my front porch again. He's right there. Come look. Quick, before he wakes up. What? I said, confused still, rubbing at my eyes. Is Preston's brother out there? He's always had a crush on me, I said as I dragged myself up from the floor to a standing position and slowly made my way to where Rachel was standing. She was a ball of excited energy, peering out my window. I moved closer to her and looked to where she was pointing. Look. Right there. She hadn't been making it up. There was a man lying face down on my porch. And he was a very big, very well-built man. From everything I could see, and I could see everything, he was built like a linebacker. His impossibly sculpted back muscles were a clear display of strength and power, caressed by golden tanned skin that looked as if it had been
censored
by the sun. His arms were large and sinewy. His thighs were thick and muscular. And his behind was perfect. I hadn't seen a more perfect behind since watching David Beckham play soccer one year. And this stranger's hair, even from this distance, I could tell was dark like my own, and thick and wavy as well. Although I had yet to see his face, it was as if Adonis had landed on my front porch, and I thought briefly, given our town's penchant for unusual visitors, maybe a god actually had. "There's a
censored
man on my front porch," I said softly, shaking my head as if that would clear the image or wake me up from a dream. Clearly, though, I wasn't dreaming, as the
censored
man was still there. "Do you think he's dead?" Rachel asked quietly. She then turned and looked at me and said, "I think we should poke him with a stick or something to make sure he's okay." She walked toward my umbrella hanging on a hook next to the front door, grabbed it and was about to unlock the door when I grabbed her, stopping her exit. "What do you think you're doing?" I hissed at her. "It could be a trap. He could be a serial killer. You can't just go out there on your own." "Then come with me," Rachel said, as if she was just asking me to go grocery shopping or asking me to do something else equally innocent and non-life-threatening with her. "No way. We're staying here and calling the police." "Ah," Rachel protested, already giving me her favorite pouty expression, which I studiously ignored as I walked away, chewing on my nail, trying to come up with how to deal with the nudist. "What a stupid reason to call the police, and you know who's going to show up, Ronnie." Blah. She made another face, and this time I had to agree with her. Ronnie was the sheriff in the small town where we lived. He was the quintessential, stereotypical small-town police officer. He spent most of his time sitting in his squad car pretending to shoot things, and then riding about town harassing anyone unlucky enough to be in the right place at the wrong time. Most of us townies tried to avoid him, but when I said small town, it wasn't an exaggeration. It was nearly impossible to avoid anyone here in Granville. There was one stoplight, one library, one hospital, and one bank. So there was no getting away from Ronnie and his ridiculous immature antics. He was only 24 after all, so I tried to cut him some slack. I lived on the outskirts of Granville, about 5 miles away from my nearest neighbor. My father and mother had left me this home when they had moved to a warmer climate. Last time I heard, they were sipping margaritas in Sarasota, having the best of times. I had no
censored
to leave. I was a country girl at heart, and I loved living in what I felt was almost a storybook of a house. It was idyllic. No noise, no neighbors, no problems, and no unexpected visitors, well, at least until now. I directed my attention back to my immediate problem. Ronnie would probably shoot the guy and ask questions later. I wasn't going to call him. "How do you think he got here?" I said to Rachel, who was now blatantly staring at the guys.
censored
"Look," she said, pointing, not even acknowledging my question, like a little kid at a zoo who sees a giraffe in person for the first time. "He has the cutest tattoo on his..."
censored
I peered closer, feeling a little like a perv as my cheeks grew warm in embarrassment. I tried to act like I was a woman of the world, but truth be told, I was a little bit of a prude. I actually easily embarrassed. I tried but failed to keep my eyes away from his backside as I looked in the direction of his bear.
censored
On it was a medium-sized tattoo, about the size of a fist. I couldn't make it out from a distance, and then I moved closer. It was a circle, with a flying creature in the middle. As I stared, I became aware that the guy was waking up. He started shifting, stirring in his sleep, and I hurriedly shut the blinds. "Okay, that was close," I admitted when my breathing was back to normal. I guess I had been hyperventilating and didn't know it. "Frightening. I was hoping that he would get up so that we could see the goods," Rachel said. I gave her an amused look and said that I was calling her husband to be as soon as the
censored
man was no longer on my porch. No fair and no fun. "That's me," I said with false cheerfulness, and she playfully slugged me on the shoulder. "So, what do you think we should do?" "Sit here and wait until he goes away," I said, going back to my couch and sitting down heavily. Rachel followed me and said, "We can't sit here indefinitely. Where do you think he's from? How did he even get out here?" "I don't know. Do you think we should ask him?" I said sarcastically, and Rachel hit me with a pillow. "Do you think he's another one of them?" she asked suddenly, and I felt a headache start to form. I knew what she was talking about, even if I didn't want to admit it. And if the marking on his flesh was any indication, yes, he was one of them, but I wasn't willing to say it out loud. Here was the strange thing about our town. We attracted interesting visitors, to say the least, visitors of the paranormal variety. Just as Roswell was rumored to attract aliens, well, our little town Granville attracted werewolves, vampires, Sasquatch, and I swear I've seen a unicorn or two. We townies weren't sure if the beings flocked here because it was a safe haven of some kind, or if it was because we were very good at keeping secrets. You see, we townies had a secret of our own. If you were born here, you could see the creatures for what they were, so no one else outside of our town knew they existed or could see them. A prime example was the unicorns I saw every now and then. To an outsider, a unicorn would look simply like a horse. Did I mention that was also the reason my parents moved? They were determined to live a normal existence, and were, frankly, tired of all the freaks and surprises, they said. I had responded that, from what I saw on the news, Florida had its own share of freaks and surprises, just of the human kind, but they had still moved. As a result, growing up with a school teacher who was part werewolf, or going to school with a girl who was a vampire wasn't that big of a deal. It was just a way of life. Nevertheless, they normally showed up with clothes on. This was the first.
Censored.
One, unless he was just a random dude wandering through the woods, but that was too much of a coincidence for me. Not to mention, there was that tattoo on him. It reminded me of something otherworldly, but I couldn't quite come up with what. "What do you think he is?" Rachel said. I shrugged. With any hope, he's just a drunk human. But there's only one way to find out. I looked at her, she looked at me and resigned. We both went toward the door. "Ready?" "We might as well." "Here's hoping he's not a vampire," Rachel said. "Their personalities are always off-putting. It's no wonder they're loners who hang out in coffins." Chapter 2. We stood next to the stranger and tried to wake him. Rachel again had the umbrella in hand, and stood there fearlessly, poking him with it. I tried speaking to him, hoping the sound of my voice would wake him up. But all my mutterings of hello and hey you fell on seemingly deaf ears. In frustration, I took the umbrella from Rachel and poked him a little more forcefully in the ribs. He moved a little bit, and we responded by jumping back in fear, and then repeated that process again, for a couple of times before he finally opened his eyes. And when he did, my heart skipped a beat. His eyes were green with huge black pupils. He was clearly not one of us. And then, as he tried to stand up, I was torn between trying to help him and standing back far enough so if he had the urge to bite me, he couldn't. Not that I had ever encountered a paranormal creature that had become violent, but even I wasn't insusceptible to being influenced by the media's negative depiction of the paranormal. Even though none of them had attacked me or even looked at me funny, horror movies did a good job of scaring me, which was funny since all the paranormal creatures I knew found horror movies offensive and stereotypical. I was pretty sure if they weren't busy hiding among humans, they would have united to form some sort of political party to end misrepresentation of their kind. I thought the idea alone held merit, and was also hilarious to think about. I could imagine the conversation as a segment on NPR. I pulled my thoughts back to the man in front of me. Unfortunately, his eyes became unfocused again, and he couldn't get himself up. With a slight moan, he collapsed onto the ground again, unconscious. "Let's drag him inside," Rachel said with a sigh. "Seriously?" "Well, we can't just leave him here." "I would." "Of course you would, Cameron." We went to reach for him when he awoke again, focused his gaze on mine and whispered, "Help me," before losing consciousness as he clutched his side. Something about his plea for help made my heart.
Censored.
I had a weakness for helping others even to the detriment of myself, and so I had Rachel help me move him inside. He was heavy, I would guess about 200 pounds of solid muscle, and he was at least 6 feet 3 inches. We managed to get him as far into my living room as possible, and then we sat him down softly. "Well, that's that," Rachel said, dusting off her hands. She then turned to me and suggested, "Why don't you give Jackie a call?" Jackie, why hadn't I thought of that? Jackie was not only our mayor, but she was the person who kept a record of all sightings of new paranormal arrivals in our town. She would know exactly what we were dealing with and how to help him. As I looked closer, I realized that he had left a trail of dark red blood from the door to the hall. Gasping, I bent down to where he had touched his side. There was blood there. He was injured. I assumed it was a bullet hole, and wondered how we hadn't noticed it before. "We need to call Jackie. Now." Rachel jumped up for her cell phone and froze in place. I looked at her, startled. She literally looked like she was frozen. Her eyes were empty. Her entire body was still. She was suddenly motionless, as if she were a statue. I grabbed her arm and shook it. "Rachel? Rachel? Are you okay?" She wasn't moving. She didn't make eye contact. Her eyes just stared straight ahead. I felt panic rising in my
Censored.
"She'll be fine," came a soft voice from behind me, and I instantly turned around, scared beyond reason. The man was now sitting up, holding his side. And as I watched, a red glow appeared under his palm, like a burning red charcoal, and then his hand moved away, revealing that the wound he had mere seconds ago was no longer there. "What did you do to her? What did you do to my friend?" I yelled, backing away from him. "Your friend is fine. I just need no one besides you and me to know I am here. Alive." He stood up slowly, and I tried to train my eyes elsewhere. His nudity made me highly uncomfortable suddenly. I tried my best to keep my eyes off of his member, but against my control, my eyes kept wandering down there, and I gulped, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "Listen," I said, drawing my eyes to his, which were regarding me with amusement now. "I don't know what you are or where you come from, but if you want me to keep your arrival a secret, no problem. Just please unfreeze my friend." He scratched at the short salt and pepper beard that had suddenly appeared on his face and shrugged his shoulders. "If that is what you want." Suddenly, Rachel was moving again, but instead of looking at me, she had a blank expression in her eyes as she walked out of the house and away from me, never looking back. I ran behind her, calling her name. "Rachel? Rachel? Are you okay? Rachel?" I grabbed her arm, but she just kept on moving as if I were invisible. In a zombie-like state, she shook me off and climbed into her car and drove away without sparing me a parting glance. I stared at her car for a long moment, watching it disappear down the dirt road that led away from my property. I looked back at my house, and instead of feeling fear towards the man waiting for me in there, I felt anger. He was about to pay for whatever he did to my friend. I marched back up the stairs to my porch, through the doorway, and slammed the door shut with a bang. "What did you do to her?" I demanded, putting my fists on my hips as I faced him. He had been looking around my house, and he stopped to stare at me curiously as I came through the door. Even in my anger, I couldn't help but notice how handsome he was. His lips were full, his cheeks perfectly sculpted. And those eyes of his, an alarming shade of gray, different from the eerie green from before, seemed to undress me as I stood there. My attraction to him was so strong suddenly that I had to struggle to remember why I was so angry. Focusing, I glared at him, waiting for a response, hoping he didn't notice that my body was a traitor. "Nothing. I did nothing to your friend. I just needed her to leave. So I told her to go home." "Told her?" I shook my head in confusion. "What are you?" I asked at last. "Isn't it obvious? I'm a warlock." 10 minutes later, I had found a towel, and he was wrapped in it. He sat on my couch looking around, and then stood up and started perusing my pictures. Picking one up at a time, he studied pictures of my parents and my friends. I had the mantel covered with pictures of my travels and excursions. I had been quite the adventurer in my early 20s, and into a few extreme sports before I started working full-time from home as a travel writer. I wondered what he thought of all my photos, and I watched with interest as his towel rode dangerously low on his hips. I couldn't see how he was keeping it up. Actually, I knew exactly how, and as a result, I was even more determined to keep my eyes above his waist. "You've traveled many places," he commented, turning around just to glance at me, before turning back and studying the pictures closely. I realized then that his eyes weren't actually only gray. When they weren't the eerie green color, they were almost a bluish gray, the color of a clear, cloudless summer day, and I found myself drawn into his gaze. He took his time to address me again. "You have a very nice home. I've never seen one like it, but then again, I'm not from these parts." I raised my brows and sat down on my couch. It was clear now that he wasn't making any plans to leave. In fact, he seemed right at home. And frankly, as long as he didn't plan to turn me into a mouse or something equally humiliating like a snail, I wasn't in a rush for him to leave. Something about his presence made me curious. I just hoped Rachel would be fine, given the spell he used on her. "Don't worry, I have no interest in harming you. And the spell I placed on your friend will wear off in a matter of minutes, although she'll have no memory of me," he said, reading my mind. It was disconcerting. "If you're going to insist on touching my things and violating my space, the least you can do is stay out of my head." He looked at me with amusement again and smiled. I liked his smile. "My apologies." I nodded in acknowledgement, not wanting to think about what his smile combined with him walking around my home in a towel was doing to me. "So what happened to you? Why don't you want anyone to know you're here? We're not like other towns. We're used to your kind." "My kind?" he said, gazing at me again. His eyes were almost hypnotic. "Yes. There are a lot of paranormal beings who live here with the rest of us in harmony. We don't have issues with each other. I assure you, we're not the fire and pitchforks kind of town. You could go flying away on a broomstick, and we wouldn't even notice. Not that you would ride on a broomstick." My voice trailed off, and I was aware that I was speaking gibberish. "Someone in your town knew that I was arriving and is trying to kill me. I don't want him or her to know that I survived." I shook my head, so that explained the wound. "It can't be someone here," I said defensively. "That's just not like us. I mean, come on, we let vampires teach school children. Why would one of us hurt a warlock?" He shrugged. "I'm not sure, but I intend to find out." "Okay then," I said, feeling annoyed that he thought one of my fellow townies was capable of harming him. "Well, you're a warlock, so I'm sure you have all this handled. Can you leave now?" "I'm staying here." He said it matter-of-factly, as if it were the most obvious choice. My eyes grew wide. "Excuse me?" "I'm staying here. It's the easiest way to stay hidden." "No," I said, sputtering, "this is my home. And you are not welcomed here. Someone's trying to kill you, for God's sake. They might kill me. I'll keep you protected." "You couldn't even keep yourself protected," I retorted hotly. "You have a point, but I need a place to hide. I don't really have anyone else to turn to. Will you help me, Cameron? I am desperate, and my powers are limited until I am completely healed." He moved slowly toward me, and I retreated further into the cushions of the couch. He sat down next to me, and his towel did nothing to conceal the way his thigh muscles flexed when he sat. He then placed his forearms on his legs and folded his hands together. His hands were large, manly, and calloused. I wondered how they would feel on my body. I pulled my thoughts away from that train of thought and sat up straight, hoping to move away from him. He caught my hand and said, "No, please stay. Please." It was the second please that made me reconsider, and I sat back down on the opposite end of the couch, needing room. I couldn't stand being so close to him. There was something about him besides his looks that excited me too much. "That bullet that I pulled out of my flesh is made from a particular precious metal," he said, suddenly turning over his palm and showing me something that looked like a red stone. I studied it and looked up at him, giving him permission with my eyes for him to continue. It will only harm my kind, but do nothing to humans. That's how I know it was personal. The bullet was meant for me. Made for me, even. My eyes trained on the area where his wound had been only minutes ago. It had healed over, leaving a scar on his otherwise perfect skin. So what do you suggest I do until then? Until you find this would-be assassin? Isn't it obvious? We can play house. I'll be your doting husband, and you'll be my wife. Chapter 3. What? No way. I jumped up from the couch, furious. I shook my finger at him. You might be some sort of magical being, but I have rights. I shouted. He looked at me impassively, and then gave me a small smile. Trust me, I'm not thrilled either. Sequestering myself isn't something I do well. My eyes grew wide. You're serious, aren't you? Of course, definitely. I don't even know your name, and you plan on living with me. It's Osmer. Sounds like a villain's name, I said shortly, crossing my arms over my
Censored.
He laughed then. No. Trust me. I'm the good guy. You don't want to meet the bad guys. Well, at least not the bad guys I've run into. I shook my head. This isn't going to work. I think it will. Why should I help you? I can grant you wishes, he said, clearly reaching. That's a genie. I rolled my eyes. You know you're mythical creatures. That's common knowledge. Try again. Tell me why I should help you. Because I need your help, and without you, I don't know how I'll find the person who's trying to kill me. He sounded so sincere, and given my inability not to help when someone asked me to, I felt myself giving in. And finally, after a few minutes standing there in silence trying to think of what to do, I said, All right, you can stay here. In the guest room, I qualified when he looked too pleased with himself upon hearing my response. He nodded. Of course. So it's settled. We're not playing house. You'll find out who's trying to kill you, and I hesitated, not knowing how to continue. I'll just stick to business as usual. He nodded. Thank you, Cameron. I was about to respond with, You're welcome, when I realized that I hadn't at any point told him my name, but yet he knew it. How do you know my name? He shrugged. I just do. I didn't want to get into any additional details regarding what else he knew about me, so I changed the subject. So how do you intend to find the person who attempted to kill you? He shook his head. I don't know. I was hoping you would have a few ideas. I have no idea. Like none at all. He sighed, resigned. Until we come up with a way to flesh out the man or being that is trying to kill me, I think I should offer my services. Whatever you need, I will do. I instantly was suspicious. His words sounded sincere but slightly sensual, as if they had a double meaning that wasn't quite so innocent. And I blushed as I thought of that meaning. I'm pretty sure from the way Osmer looked at me, that he would gladly fulfill all my needs, especially in the bedroom. At that thought, I felt a shiver go down my spine, and I hoped he hadn't noticed. I left the room without another word. It was settled. I was now stuck with an attractive, alluring man of the paranormal variety as a roommate. It could be worse, I thought to myself, but I wasn't sure how. I had a deadline to meet, so I spent most of the week in my office, avoiding Osmer even when I wasn't working. He was busy anyway, looking through spell books that seemed to materialize from nowhere, combing through archives at the library in the middle of the night when no one was there, looking for any clues to the identity of the person who might be interested in harming him. He kept to himself for the most part. Sometimes when I knew he wasn't looking, I would sneak furtive glances at him and our eyes would meet. Unnerved, I was always the one who would break eye contact and disappear into another room. I honestly didn't know how to interact with him. I spent most of my nights tossing and turning, not used to having someone in my house. I didn't see him much, unless he was actually looking for me, which didn't happen often. Hence, I was surprised when he knocked on my office door one morning. I reluctantly stopped working and stuck my head out. I could smell them before he even had a chance to offer me some, and I hungrily reached for the blueberry muffins that he had in his hand. I bit down into one and moaned. "These are delicious. Did you spike them with witch's brew or something?" I joked. He looked at me with a serious expression. "How did you know?" I immediately began to choke and dropped the muffin, while he thumped me on the back. I was joking. That was a joke. Unfortunately, I have a sweet tooth, so I drove into town to get something sweet, yet breakfast-like to eat. I coughed a little, still trying to dislodge a little of the muffin from my throat, and said, "Drove? Aren't you supposed to be staying under the radar? And what did you just say about driving? You don't have a car." I narrowed my eyes at him as I realized what must have happened. "You took my car." He nodded. "Yeah, is that a problem?" "Of course that's a problem. You're not covered under my insurance or anything." I knew I was being silly, but I felt our whole situation was ridiculous. "I know this situation is causing you undue stress." "No kidding," I said moodily. He studied me. "So how about I help you relax?" I eyed him suspiciously. "No, thank you. Seriously, give me a chance. I promise you. You'll have a great time." I looked at him and then back at my laptop. It wouldn't hurt to take a short break, I thought to myself. "What did you have in mind?" He said to me, "There's a canyon not too far from here. Do you want to see something cool?" Given that he was a warlock, his version of cool would probably be something CNN-worthy, so I was curious. I had a friend once who was some sort of shapeshifter, and she also happened to be a nerd as well, so when I would rather go outside and play, she would shapeshift into me and do my homework for me. It worked out really well until my mom busted us, and then grounded me. I asked my friend if she were willing to be grounded as me, but apparently that wasn't her idea of a good time. Hence, I was really curious as to what Osmer could do. During the drive, I struggled not to doze off given how tired I was, but since I insisted on driving, dozing off wasn't an option. Osmer talked to me about my life the whole way there. I'm not sure if it was an attempt to help me stay awake, or if he had genuinely been interested in what I had to say. Either way, it had been a telling conversation. "So you grew up an only child?" he asked. I nodded and yawned, pushing my hair back and away from my face. "What about you?" I figured I might as well be friendly. "I'm not too sure. I didn't know my parents." I felt bad instantly and said, "Have you tried searching for them? There are so many sites now online that you can use to track down your ancestry. As long as you have some basic information, I heard it's pretty easy." He laughed. "I don't think websites search that far back." I then looked at him from the side of my eye. "How old are you exactly?" He hesitated before answering, "Why does it matter?" I took my eyes away from the road for a second, admiring his silhouette as the sun's rays beamed down on him, and Osmer's whole face was cast in this warm orange glow. I would have stared longer if it weren't for the horn that blared, bringing my focus back on the road as I swerved to get back into my own lane. "Sorry about that," I mumbled. He merely shrugged. "We're still alive. That's all that matters." I didn't know if he was being funny or serious, but then I saw the look in his eye and knew it was the former. "You didn't answer my question," I said to him when the silence stretched between us. I lost count of the years. I would guess around 304. After the first century, they all seemed to roll together. I shook my head. "You don't look a day over 35, I said, meaning it. Besides the salt and pepper beard, his jet black hair showed no signs of changing. And his face was still perfect, as if carved from stone. He didn't have a wrinkle in sight. I couldn't say the same about myself. I swore that I could see wrinkles forming at the edge of my eyes. "So you don't know your parents? Do you even have any idea where you're from?" He shrugged. "I honestly don't know anything about my past." "But there's no way you could have just appeared. There's no such thing as spontaneous generation," I said, thinking about high school biology. "What's your earliest memory?" he asked me. "My mother taking me to the grocery store with her, and me falling out of the cart." What happened? Did you get hurt? I shook my head. One of your kind caught me, a telekinetic, and lowered me to the ground gently. My turn. Did you just wake up one day a wizard? Warlock. Not wizard. He laughed, genuinely amused. I remember only a little from my childhood, and those memories entailed me trying to do magic in the fields, when I should have been attending to the animals. That's all I remember. Those are my first memories. And how old were you? 12. I think. And from then on you what? Raised yourself? From what I do remember, yes. Sounds lonely. You're right. It was. I found myself feeling sad for the little boy he had been, who didn't know his parents or even where he was from. And that conversation made him seem more human to me. We rode in my car as far as it could go into the hills, and then we climbed down a few boulders to where a meteor had landed at one point and left what was now a huge canyon, at least 20 miles wide just outside of town. All right, Mr. Warlock. Let's see your skills, I teased, feeling more at ease with him. He walked into the center of the deep valley and said, "You might want to stand back." I raised a brow at him and said, "Seriously?" "Yes, seriously." And he held out his arms, winked at me, and in a flash of light, Osmer was gone, and in his place was a creature that I had only seen in storybooks, a creature that never once visited my town, at least as far back as I could remember. It stood at least 10 feet high, and it was reptilian in nature. It had wings and a tail that stretched at least another 10 feet behind it, and seemed like a cross between a pterodactyl and a Komodo dragon. And then I realized that's exactly what it was, a dragon. Not much surprised me being from Granville, but seeing him shift into a dragon, now that was shocking. I stumbled back, instantly afraid. "Osmer," I whispered, and the creature looked down at me, and its eyes were familiar. They were the same eerie green that I remembered from when I initially found Osmer on the porch in front of my house. Osmer and the creature in front of me were apparently one. And as I reached out to touch the creature, a flash of light blinded me for a second, and Osmer appeared, catching my hand in his. "Did I scare you?" he asked, holding onto my hand. I shook my head and then shrugged. "At first, yes, but then I noticed your eyes. I knew it was you. That's amazing what you can do." He looked at me thoughtfully, and then began to lightly stroke the back of my hand, never taking his eyes away from mine. Gently he pulled me closer, and I let him, not resisting as I felt hypnotically drawn to him. He brought the palm of my hand to his lips, and
censored
it. It was romantic and sensual, and I felt myself stepping even closer, so that our bodies were finally touching. I thought now was the time where we would act on the
censored
tension that seemed to sizzle between us and grow stronger as the days passed. I opened my mouth, ready to extend an indecent proposal Osmer's way, when he cut me off saying, "Would you like to fly with me?" I frowned. How? I was taken aback. Here I was thinking about what we could be doing together on the ground right now, and instead he was talking about flying? Maybe I was wrong, maybe the
censored
tension I had been avoiding all along was in my own head. And then I looked down at the evidence of his
censored
pressing against my thigh and realized that no, I wasn't wrong. Osmer just had other plans. I don't know. I figured I could take you for a ride. It could be a first for us. A first date. Your first time riding a dragon. My first time allowing a human to straddle me. Well, let me take that back. It'll be the first time as a dragon that a human has straddled me. I've had my share of adventurous
censored
partners, he quipped, and I rolled my eyes. I said dubiously, "I don't know, Osmer. I don't want to fall off." He shook his head. "You won't? That's not possible. A simple spell will keep your body on mine, unable to move." That sounds thrilling? Crazy. Maybe it is, but the look in your eyes tells me that you would at least want to try. I couldn't lie. I definitely wanted to try. Let's do it. And before I could change my mind, there was another flash of light, and the dragon was back. I took note of its jet black skin and nails as thick as 2x4s, and grimaced. It lowered itself to the ground, and reluctantly I approached it, and awkwardly hefted myself onto its neck. I marveled at its wings that were the color of aquamarine, with delicate silver veins running through them. And before I could change my mind and jump off, we were in the air and I closed my eyes and started to scream in terror. I screamed as he accelerated and pushed off into the clouds. I screamed as he did loops in the sky. And then finally I opened my eyes and looked around. And I realized that we were just floating, drifting through the clouds. Part of me wanted to reach out and touch the clouds, but another part of me was convinced that doing so would mean instant death. So I hesitantly attempted to lift my hand to reach out and touch the fluffy white objects that surrounded me, when I realized I couldn't move my hands. I tried to shift my hips and realized I couldn't do that either. Apparently the spell was working, I thought happily as I forced myself to relax and not look down. I was able to relax at least, but the looking down part proved a challenge. And when I did look down, I immediately regretted it. That feeling of relaxation completely disappeared. I was scared again, and I guess Osmer sensed it as he started to slowly descend. And I promptly closed my eyes as the wind tossed my hair straight back, and I tried not to scream again. Finally, I chanced a glance and realized we were directly above town. I briefly wondered if Osmer had the ability to make us invisible. If not, wasn't he afraid that whomever was out to kill him would see us? That thought easily drifted away, as I gasped at the beauty below me. Our town really was picturesque. We glided down past the lakes and thick forests with trees the colors of fall, covered in bright red, yellow, and green leaves. I was tempted to stick my feet in the lakes we passed, and then remembered at the last moment that I was stuck to Osmer. And finally, he left the town area and drifted back to the canyon. I could see my car parked haphazardly on the road, and then he flew past it, and he settled back on the ground, and immediately I could move my hands and the rest of my body. I clumsily climbed off of him, and again there was the flash of light, and he was back. He smiled at me and said, "Not too shabby for a first date, right?" I narrowed my eyes at him, and crossed my arms over my
censored.
So that was our first date, but we're already living together. That seems a little backwards, don't you think? He looked down at me again, coming closer, and said, "Just go with it, Cameron. I don't bite." And I opened my mouth, a retort on my lips when his mouth settled on mine. It was unexpected. It was sexy. He was delicious. And as his lips moved over my own, my
censored
dipped into his mouth, and I found myself deepening our
censored.
I placed my hands in his hair that felt like silk against my fingertips, and greedily returned his
censored,
matching and even exceeding the level of passion that started all of this. When we finally broke away from each other, we were both breathing heavily, and I shook my head, astounded by my own behavior. "I'm sorry." "I'm not," he quickly said, reaching again for me and
censored
me so thoroughly that I finally understood what women were talking about when they said their knees grew weak. Unfortunately, for me though, I wasn't just having a physical response to Osmer. I felt as if that
censored
connected us emotionally, and I wasn't willing to go there with him. I couldn't. I didn't do emotions, especially with someone who possessed powers beyond what my mind could fathom. I pushed away at his shoulders, and he looked at me disappointed with eyes dark with
censored.
"We can't do this anymore. I want you out of my house." And with that I walked away from him, determined not to look back as he called out for me to stop. Chapter 4. I couldn't sleep that night. I shifted back and forth in bed, thinking about Osmer. And it was the intensity of my thoughts that scared me. My
censored
for him was all-consuming. I wanted him so much. Yet, I had pushed him away. When I had arrived home, he had been there already, inside the house waiting for me. He sat at the dining room table, his hands folded. I didn't know how he had gotten home before me, or unlocked the door. But he was a warlock, so what did I expect? "What are you doing here?" I asked him, avoiding eye contact as I tossed my keys on the table. "I wanted to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about." "Cameron, I shook my head at him, making it clear that I was done talking. You can stay here tonight. I want you gone by morning. You just have to figure out who's trying to harm you some other way. I can't have you in my home anymore. He attempted to reason with me, but I was too afraid that his reasoning would start to make sense to me and I would give in, and I didn't want to give in. I hadn't ever made love with any of the paranormal beings that came through our town, and truth be told, I was afraid to. I was especially afraid that Osmer harbored some sort of power over me, and that maybe he was using that to incite this.
Censored.
I felt for him nearly all day and night. I believed distance from him would bring me back to my senses. I wanted control over my emotions again, and I wasn't going to achieve it in his presence. This isn't working, I thought to myself as I stared up at the ceiling in my bedroom, pushing memories of our argument aside. All I could think about was that Osmer was just down the hall, and how easy it would be to slip into his room and let him have me. I wanted him to have me. And as I tried to think of something else, anything else, I found that I couldn't. I was at the mercy of my body, and it was telling me that I needed him inside me. I didn't know when want had become a need, but somewhere along the line that threshold had been crossed. I was going to Osmer, he just didn't know it yet.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
I stood up and didn't bother dressing as I left my room. I walked purposefully down the hall and didn't bother to knock. I just reached forward and turned the knob, walking into the dark room. I waited for my eyes to adjust, and when they did, I could see Osmer was sitting up on his bed. The blanket around his waist, his bare,
Censored.
showing. He was sitting up, clearly waiting for me.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
The next morning when I woke up next to him, I expected to feel awkward. Or at the very least, regret. But no, after making love over and over that night several times, Osmer had whispered in my ear how much he adored me, how much he
Censored.
me. His words made me feel confident, secure, and valued. His hands, almost worshipful on my body in the wee hours of the night, made me feel special, dare I say, even loved. Weeks after we became lovers, I sensed something was bothering Osmer, and I figured it was not knowing who had harmed him. I contacted Jackie and asked her if she could stop by one afternoon. I figured that she might be able to help him, and I trusted her. I didn't give her any details. I just told her that I had a friend I wanted her to meet. She agreed to stop by that very afternoon. I didn't tell Osmer, and so he was surprised when she showed up at the door. "I see you finally met your mate," Jackie said, smiling at me, as she spotted Osmer behind me in the living room when I opened the door. What was more surprising than her words, though, was that they were directed not at me, but at Osmer. I looked at her curiously, confused by her words. "Jackie, what are you talking about?" Jackie frowned and looked from me to Osmer. I thought. Silently, Osmer shook his head, and Jackie gave him a funny look, not continuing her sentence. "I'm sorry, Osmer. When Cameron finally called, I thought it meant the two of you were ready. That you had," she paused, "well, you know." I was still at a loss. I looked at Osmer. His expression was unreadable. Instantly, I felt my body grow tense. "Osmer, what's going on? How do you and Jackie know each other?" He looked at Jackie and then back at me and sighed, "I lied to you, Cameron." His comment didn't register at all. I stared between the two of them in confusion. "What? I don't understand what's going on." Jackie looked between the two of us, and her eyes were full of regret. "I'm sorry, Osmer. I thought she knew." "Knew what?" I said, growing angry as she moved to leave. I stood in front of her, blocking her exit. "Osmer will explain everything." She then put on her sunglasses and walked purposefully to her car. I moved to follow behind her, but Osmer stopped me. "Let Jackie go," he said softly. "This is between you and me. You see, I didn't come here to find out who hurt me. I came here to find you. You're my betrothed. My mate." Chapter 5. I was speechless. What was he talking about? I immediately started asking him questions, unsure where to even start. What do you mean I'm your mate? And betrothed? I'm not promised to anyone. That very idea is crazy. I hissed at him. He gestured toward the couch. Let's sit down. We need to talk. No. I want explanations now. Tell me the truth, Osmer. So there was never a threat? He shook his head. I just needed a way to get close to you. That's it? I said bitterly. You wanted to get close to me, so you did so by being deceitful? You think that's okay with me? You think that would make me love you? He was silent, speechless for once. That satisfied me to no end. Finally, he didn't have a snappy comeback, and it was because there was nothing he could say to make things better. And he knew it. I didn't bother trying too hard to hide how I really felt. I was shocked. I felt so betrayed and most of all, stupid. I walked away from him, and when he tried to catch my arm, I turned around and screamed at him. Just leave me alone. Go away. Cameron, please, just listen to me. I was done listening, as I moved to my bedroom door. I walked in and slammed it behind me. I needn't have bothered, because he was suddenly in the bedroom with me, standing next to the bed where we had made love countless times. Immediately, I became angry. So, this was what it was like to get into an argument with a warlock? It meant that you never got any space. So tell me about all your lies. All the times I asked you about this so-called person who was coming after you. What about that? I had to lie, Cameron. If I hadn't, you wouldn't have gotten to know me. You would have turned me away. So yeah, I lied. I did what I thought was best. I was too angry to pick his words apart, but why Osmer? You couldn't just walk up to me and ask me out on a date like a normal person? And what's this about you being my mate? I'm a human. I don't have a mate. I have a partner. Or a boyfriend or a husband, for goodness sake. You are my mate. Do you want to know the real reason beings like me show up in this town? I crossed my arms and just stared at him, knowing I was acting immature, but at that point I didn't really care. No. Why? I said grudgingly. To find our mates. For some reason this town, this area calls to us. It's a draw that we cannot ignore nor shake off. When I arrived, I realized that my mate, the one I was meant to be with, was a human. I saw you walk out of the bank, and I just knew my mate was you. And I felt as if I knew you. My
Censored.
For you emotionally, physically, was so strong it hurt. I could only stare at him silently, because I had felt the same way. I never felt that way about anyone else. I talked to Jackie about you, and she made it clear that you weren't interested in my kind, so I had to find a way to get you to give me a chance to get to know me. Let me reiterate, you could have just knocked on my door like a normal guy and took me out on a date. Please. You would have taken one look at me, realized I was one of the others, and wanted nothing to do with me. You don't know that. Be honest with yourself and with me, Cameron. You wouldn't have given me a chance. I didn't want to admit he was right, so I threw his words back in his face. Why should I be honest with you, Osmer, when from the beginning you've been lying to me? I shouldn't have lied, but I didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry. So all that was a ruse? The blood? The wound? They were all fake? He nodded. Go ahead and be angry, but I did what I had to do to be with you. I just find it ironic that all of it was worthless. Because of what I've done, you don't even want me in your life anymore. He seemed angry now and exasperated. He sat down on my couch and raked a hand through his hair. I've been looking for you my whole life. Something I don't know what drew me here. To you. I spent so much time trying to come up with a way to approach you, but I couldn't think of anything. I knew I had to do something to make it seem like I needed you, something convincing where even if you knew what I was, it wouldn't matter. And so your plan was to show up.
Censored.
At my door? I said incredulously. He laughed ruefully. I figured that I might as well use all my assets. If I was going to lie, at least I was going to give you something nice to look at. I was silent for a second and then said, I understand why you lied. He looked up at me in surprise. You do? I nodded. You're right. I wouldn't have even entertained your interest. Even though I've spent my whole life living around your kind, well, not a war-dragon or warlock, whatever you prefer to be called, I would have been too scared to start something with you. I sat down next to him. So you knew from the beginning that you wanted to be with me? He shook his head. No. I didn't want to be with you. I had to be with you. I felt something immediately. When I saw you for the first time, it was as if you had part of my soul. My hand shook as I reached for his. I guess I should say that I know the feeling. At first, I thought it was just
censored.
But no, I want so much more from you. I was just too afraid until now to tell you. I wrapped my arms around his neck and
censored
him softly, hoping that with my
censored
he could feel the emotions that I still had not spoken. I hadn't said how his smile brightened my day. I hadn't said how much I enjoyed talking to him, how his mere presence relaxed me. I didn't mention that I felt that he was my soulmate. However, I did mention that I loved him. As I pulled my mouth away from his, we said it together and then laughed. He stared down into my eyes and I stared back into his. Does this mean you accept my apology? He ventured. I shrugged my shoulders. No, it means I forgive you for now, but be prepared to spend your whole life being reminded of how much you screwed up. The rest of my life? At least, I said as I brought my lips up to his again for another heartfelt
censored.
Thank you for reading my book. If you like this story, I think you'll enjoy my book Destiny of the Dragon Prince. A big favor to ask. I would really love it if you could take a few seconds to leave me a review. Thank you so much in advance. About the author. Selina Coffey is a romance writer who lives happily in London with her husband and son. She is a hopeless romantic who grew up always believing in love, and she is not ashamed to admit this. It is this belief that makes her so passionate about writing crazy love stories. A stereotypical girly girl, she loves shopping. So whenever she gets a chance and the spare cash, you will probably find her browsing online for the next pair of shoes to add to her collection. You can find her online at www.selinacoffey.com. Contact her at hello@selinacoffey.com. Closing credits. This has been Wanted by the Dragon. Written by Selina Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Copyright 2024 by Lovey Books Limited. Production copyright 2024 by Lovey Books Limited.